Romeo and Juliet is not a love story, and Juliet is not a weak little girl who gives up everything for a man she met 3 days ago. Okay, that second one is partially true, but there is so much more to her character than just her relationship with Romeo. Hello, hi, welcome, or welcome back to Mia Likes Movies. My name is Mia, and I like movies. I like a lot of other things too, but Mia Likes Movies just sounded the best. And one thing about me is I love Shakespeare. On my wall, I have 2 Shakespeare posters. I have a little picture from Act 2, Scene 1 of As You Like It, and then I don't think it's in the frame, or you can't really see it, but there is a poster of Shakespeare's Britain, which basically is a poster of all of the settings of different Shakespeare plays, specifically in Britain, but they also go through some of the more fantasy ones too. I don't know, it's pretty cool. I like it a lot. Thanks, Mom, for giving that to me. I also think that the second video on this channel was about Shakespeare. It was like a long rant about it, but no one watched that, and that's okay. I don't blame you. I had a totally different video planned for this week, but in all honesty, as I was writing it, I wasn't feeling inspired, and I just needed some time away from that script, so I ended up turning this one out in 3 hours, because apparently I had a lot to say about it. I fell in love with Romeo and Juliet in my freshman year of high school when we watched Zeffirelli's 1968 movie version of the play in English class, honors English. I would then eventually go on to play Gregory and assistant direct one production in college, and then eventually get to play Juliet, as well as Gregory and Peter in a professional production after college for 2 years. I did that tour for 2 years. This play is arguably the reason why I fell in love with acting and theater. It's very important to me, and getting to play Juliet was an honor, and I really enjoyed getting to explore her character throughout the 2 years that I got to play her. There's a lot in Romeo and Juliet that tells us about Juliet, and I fear a lot of people misinterpret her character. I think a lot of people misinterpret her as being weak and passive in the story, but that's what I'm here to talk about and argue about today. Juliet is not passive in the narrative. It's her strength and resilience in spite of her station as a young woman in her society that helps to propel the plot, and thus the overarching themes and ideas throughout the play. So let's just get into it. Firstly, Juliet is a Capulet, one of the 2 houses both alike in dignity in fair Verona, which we lay our scene. The Capulets and Montagues, 2 important families in Verona, which is where the play takes place, alike in dignity, meaning that they are of the same standing in society. They've been fighting for so long. This feud has been going on for so long at the time that we meet them in this play that no one even knows why they're fighting anymore. It's like that one episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender.
I suppose it's time we forget the past
and look to the future.
We are first introduced to Juliet as an idea. Lord Capulet, Juliet's father, tells a young suitor known as the County Paris, or just Paris as I will refer to him as, about his daughter Juliet. Paris has asked for Juliet's hand in marriage, but Capulet is reluctant. After all, she is only 13. But saying o'er what I have said before, my child is yet a stranger in the world. She hath not yet seen the change of 14 years. Let 2 more summers wither in her pride, ere we may think her ripe to be a bride. Juliet is the only child of Capulet, and from what we can gather in this scene, Capulet is fiercely protective over her. As he says, this is not the first time he has said this. She's too young, she's not ready. When Paris replies to this with, younger than she are happy mother's maid, meaning girls younger than her, 13, have been married off before, Capulet retorts with the following, and too soon marred are those so early made. Earth hath swallowed all my hopes but she's the hopeful lady of my earth. Capulet does end up giving in, but asks Paris to woo her and get her heart. At this time, he does not order Juliet to marry Paris. He makes Paris earn it, thus giving Juliet some agency in the story. From just the scene, we can see that Capulet and Juliet at this point have a fairly positive relationship. Capulet respects her enough as a person to give her that agency and also wishes to protect her. He doesn't just want to marry her off in order to better the family. We are introduced to Juliet in the next scene, but not before we meet her mother, Lady Capulet, and her nurse. If you don't know what nurse means in the context of this show, basically a lot of rich families throughout history, like antiquity, the rich women would not actually nurse. I keep saying nurse, it's not going to feel like a real word anymore. Would not actually like breastfeed their children. Instead, they would hire essentially a maid to do it, a housemaid to nurse the children. So that's what the nurse was/is. She cares for Juliet. She was the one that actually breastfed and nursed Juliet as a child. So unlike Capulet and Juliet that seem to have this positive relationship, we can kind of sort of see a distance between Lady Capulet and Juliet. In the scene, Lady Capulet orders the nurse to fetch Juliet so that she can talk to her about Paris's proposal. Once the nurse does retrieve Juliet, the Lady Capulet sends the nurse away so that she can talk to Juliet in private. But then Lady Capulet says this: "This is the matter. Nurse, give leave a while. We must talk in secret. Nurse, come back again. I have remembered me. Thou'st hear our counsel." Lady Capulet quickly changes her mind, summoning the nurse back to hear her advice. What exactly causes her to change her mind is up to the actor, as we don't get an exact reason in the script. What we read here is what we get. I like to think that after Lady Capulet says, "We must talk in secret," she looks at Juliet and realizes that she doesn't want to have this conversation, or that she knows Juliet won't listen to her, and so she needs the nurse to sort of back her up, which the nurse does end up doing. Regardless, in the scene, Lady Capulet tells Juliet to essentially make Paris love her at the party. Unlike Capulet, who gives the decision and therefore power to Juliet, Lady Capulet does the opposite. Lady Capulet sees Paris as more than worthy of her daughter, as he is rich and relatively attractive. When asked about marriage in this scene, which is Act 1, Scene 3, by the way, Juliet says, "It is an honor that I dream not of." Juliet has not thought about marriage. We can see in this moment that she is more aligned with her father, or at least aligned with where he begins in that previous scene. She's young, they haven't really thought about it yet, and there's still time. Juliet in many ways is defined, at least in the beginning of the play, by her relationship with her parents. Their decisions and conflicts create the world in which Juliet must navigate. So not to harp on Act 1, Scene 3 for so long, but it really does just give us so much information up front about Juliet's character. It's her first scene in the play, the one where we actually get to see her, so it's a lot of exposition. In this scene, we actually get confirmation that Juliet is a Leo. Yes, that's right, Juliet is actually a fire sign. When Lady Capulet references Juliet's age, the nurse says this: "Even or odd of all days in the year, come Lammas Eve at night shall she be 14. Essentially, what that means is that Juliet will turn 14 the night before Lammas. Lammas is a Christian holiday and festival that is meant to mark sort of like the first fruits of harvest, and typically this happens on or before August 1st. Once again, I'm making Juliet a Leo. And as a Leo myself, this is very important to me. Leos are signified by the Strength card in tarot and are known for being dramatic, stubborn, and fiercely loyal. Their animal symbol is the lion, and Shakespeare often uses stars and astrology in his works to create metaphors, tell time, or even inform the audience about the character. I don't think it was a coincidence that Shakespeare would just like casually choose this date as Juliet's birthday. She's a fire sign, babes. She's not a little crybaby, and she's a strong and powerful young woman. Okay. Also, in the iconic balcony scene, which we will get to, but we're not there yet, okay? Romeo compares Juliet to the sun, and the sign Leo is actually ruled by the sun in traditional astrology. But I'm afraid I'm getting ahead of myself here. Just know that she's a Leo and it's important, okay? So moving on. Juliet is smart and witty. Just look at her first encounter with Romeo at the Capulet party in a couple of scenes later.
"If I profane with my unworthiest hand this holy shrine, the gentle sin is this: my lips, two blushing pilgrims ready stand to smooth the rough touch with a gentle kiss."
Good pilgrim, you do wrong your hand too much. Which mannerly devotion shows in this? For saints have hands that pilgrims' hands do touch, and palm to palm is holy palmer's kiss.
Have not saints lips, and holy palms too?
Aye, pilgrim, lips that they must use in prayer.
Oh then, dear saint, let lips do what hands do. They pray. Grant thou, lest faith turn to despair.
Saints do not move, though grant for prayer's sake.
Then move not, while my prayer's effect I take. Thus, from my lips, by thine, my sin is purged.
Juliet easily yes-ands Romeo's religious metaphors, showing her wit Romeo and thus the audience. We can see that Juliet, although hesitant, does show interest in Romeo almost right away. Also, she's bold. They're openly kissing at this party, and yes, it's a masquerade party, or in whatever interpretation. Romeo is in hiding at the party. He's not supposed to be there, but still, Juliet is like openly kissing this guy that's not Paris at her family's party. Juliet doesn't give a fuck. This cute boy is saying that she is a saint, a shrine, and unworthy of her touch. You would fold too. So that's just a little bit about Juliet as a character, or at least how the play sort of introduces her in the first portion. In my opinion, we're not meant to see Juliet as this typical ingenue. Lord Capulet gives her agency. She tells her mom that she does not dream of marriage, which is something that young girls at this time were sort of taught to strive to think of. She volleys easily with Romeo and kisses him at a party. She's daring and she is strong. And this is also seen throughout her actions in the play. So Act 2, Scene 2, the iconic balcony scene. Everyone knows it, but no one focuses on the most important part. Juliet is the one who swears her love to Romeo first. Juliet is the one who proposes marriage. After she and Romeo are talking for a while, she hears some noise within her house and goes inside. When she comes back, she tells Romeo the following: 3 words, dear Romeo, and good night indeed. If that thy bent of love be honorable, thy purpose marriage, send me word tomorrow by one that I'll procure to come to thee, where and what time thou wilt perform the rite, and all my fortunes at thy foot I'll lay, and follow thee, my lord, throughout the world. Juliet tells Romeo that she will send a messenger to him tomorrow so that he can tell her yes or no to marrying her. He also has to plan the wedding, but still, she's sending him a messenger and he gets to decide yes or no. At this point, Juliet knows that her only other marriage prospect is Paris, and she doesn't like Paris. And we know that she knows that Lady Capulet is pushing her towards Paris. And we can assume that Lord Capulet has said something to Juliet about it as well, but we don't know for sure as we don't see that in the play. Regardless, Paris has at least one of her parents' blessings. In this moment, she decides to propose marriage to Romeo because her only other option at this time is to let her parents choose for her. And she doesn't want that. At the end of the scene, she keeps calling Romeo back as he leaves, and he listens. Juliet has the power in this relationship. Romeo's only power in the relationship is being a man in society, which gives him inherent power and autonomy where she does not, which is why he can arrange the wedding and he can pick the time the messenger meets him. Juliet can't just go out and do that. She can't go and plan the wedding. She doesn't have the power in society to do that because she's a 13-year-old girl. There is a really fun scene between the nurse and Juliet after the nurse has gotten confirmation from Romeo that he will marry her at Friar Lawrence's cell. The whole scene is the nurse avoiding telling Juliet what Romeo has said, and Juliet, quite frankly, is being a little bitch about it. It's a really funny scene, and once again shows that Juliet is kind of a tough cookie. She doesn't just accept it when the nurse doesn't tell her what Romeo said. She fights back. So after they get married, but before they consummate the marriage, Romeo ends up killing Juliet's cousin, Tybalt, who, in a way, got what was coming to him. Maybe that's a controversial take. Maybe Tybalt got what was coming to him. That's a whole different conversation. But all that to say, Juliet is waiting for Romeo to come to her so they can consummate the marriage. But then the nurse comes in and tells Juliet that Romeo has killed Tybalt. It was literally 3 hours between when they got married and when the nurse tells Juliet. Juliet says, when I, thy 3 hours wife. 3 hours, that's like one movie. In this scene, Act 3, Scene 2, we get some of the most profound poetry ever to be writ in the English language. Oh, serpent heart hid with the flowering face, did ever dragon keep so fair a cave? Beautiful tyrant, fiend angelical, dove-feathered raven, wolvish ravening lamb, despised substance of divinest show, just opposite to what thou justly seemst, a damned saint, an honorable villain. Oh, nature, what hadst thou to do in hell, when thou didst bower the spirit of a fiend in mortal paradise of such sweet flesh? Was ever book containing such vile matter so fairly bound? Oh, that deceit should dwell in such a gorgeous palace. This, in all honesty, is one of my most favorite underrated Shakespeare speeches. Juliet conjures these contradicting images: beautiful tyrant, fiend angelical, dove-feathered raven, wolvish ravening lamb. All of these images use descriptors that are opposite of what they are describing. In this moment, Juliet is sort of dealing with the cognitive dissonance of the fact that her husband her cousin, someone she loves so much, doing something heinous and horrible to another person she loves. Romeo is this fiend angelical, the wolfish ravening lamb. How can he be so handsome, so kind, so beloved to her, and then turn around and murder her cousin? And that's exactly what she's asking here. In this scene, the nurse also tells Juliet that Romeo's punishment for Tybalt is that he is exiled and banished from Verona. At first, Juliet accepts this and sort of gives up. However, after basically threatening to kill herself, the nurse tells her that she can go get Romeo from Friar Lawrence. This is important because at the beginning of the scene, the nurse was very anti-Romeo. She could not see how Juliet still could harbor any love for him in this moment. It is only after seeing Juliet's true love for him that she changes her mind and offers to go fetch him for her. Juliet gives a ring to the nurse to give to Romeo to have him come to her. It is not Romeo that we see make the decision to go find Juliet. It is Juliet's love for him that convinces the nurse to go get him. Without Juliet's conviction in this moment, Romeo would have probably just killed himself, which he threatens to do in the following scene with Friar Lawrence, prior to the nurse giving him the ring from Juliet. Romeo doesn't do shit in this play besides be sad and horny and Tybalt. I also want to play Romeo, so let me play Romeo. Next, we see Romeo and Juliet in the early hours of the following morning. Juliet gives Romeo a premonition of sorts before he runs to go be banished. "Oh God, I have an ill divining soul. Methinks I see thee, now thou art so low, as one dead in the bottom of a tomb. Either my eyesight fails, or thou lookest pale." Juliet literally predicts their ill-fated reunion at the Capulet tomb at the end of the play. Her ill-divining soul, divining as in divination or prediction, sees Romeo as dead in a tomb, which is literally what happens. And I actually just picked up on this when I was rereading the script for this video, and it goes to show how you can do the show and read this play so many times and find something new each time. I literally worked on this play essentially for 2 years straight, and I never picked up on that. So that's why I love Shakespeare. Then Lord Capulet changes his mind and decides that, in spite of the family's grief, Juliet will marry Paris in a few days. Lady Capulet delivers the news first to the grieving Juliet, and Juliet claps back. Lord Capulet comes in, and Juliet does play it a little bit cooler with him than she does with her mom. There's less monologues, but she still defies him, and this angers both of them, especially Lord Capulet, which gives me my favorite line in the whole play. "God's bread, it makes me mad." Basically, he tells her that she will marry Paris, or he will disown her. Juliet asks them to at least consider postponing the marriage for like at least a week, or she will kill herself. There's a lot of threatening in this, so I don't know why anyone was surprised at the end of the play. Again, another thing I just realized is that these kids are constantly threatening, and like no one like thought that they were actually going to do it, and then they actually do, and then they're like, "Oh my God, I can't believe they did it." Guys, they say it like every scene. It's not funny, but it's funny. So once her parents have disappeared, Juliet seeks counsel from the nurse, asking her what she should do. The nurse tells her that she thinks it's best for Juliet to marry Paris, and that he, quote, excels her first match. In this moment, Juliet realizes the nurse is not on her side anymore, and she takes matters into her own hands. "Go, counselor, thou and my bosom henceforth shall be twain." She denounces the nurse, and thus her family, and goes to Friar Lawrence to hatch a plan. Juliet doesn't just accept the circumstances thrust upon her. She works within the confines of her station as a young woman in this society to make her life her own. At the friar's, Juliet tells him to help her come up with a plan and be with Romeo, or once again, she will kill herself. And it will be his fault because 1, he didn't help her, and 2, he's the one that married them. So he's kind of at fault here. His reputation is also in jeopardy. This is when the friar comes up with the plan for Juliet to fake her own death and for Romeo to sort of whisk her away. A foolproof plan in which nothing can go wrong and everyone will live happily ever after. Don't you agree? Once again, Juliet's conviction and love for Romeo is what moves the plot along, not Romeo. Romeo doesn't do anything. Juliet is the one that convinces the friar, the man with power and station in society, to give her the means to achieve her goals. She does what she can to move throughout the world of the play in her own terms. So Juliet goes through with the plan, it works, she's buried in Capulet's tomb, and the next time we, the audience, see her, alive at least, is after Romeo drinks the poison, after seeing her, thinking that she is actually dead. Because the message was never delivered to him, letting him know of the plan. Fun fact, the reason for this is because there was like a pandemic / quarantine happening in and around Mantua, which did not allow Friar Lawrence's messenger to go into Mantua to deliver the letter to Romeo. I performed this play after 2020, and it was like really poignant realizing that the reason why the whole miscommunication happens at the end is low-key because of a pandemic. It really does hit different after 2020, unfortunately. When Juliet first wakes up, the first person she actually sees is Friar Lawrence, who went to the tomb after hearing that his letter to Romeo was never delivered. He tries to get her out of the tomb to safety, but once she sees Romeo, she does not go with him. In his flight to convince her, Friar Lawrence tells her, "Come, I'll dispose of thee among a sisterhood of holy nuns." Imagine waking up from faking your death, hoping to see your beloved husband, and instead of him, it's the priest that married you, and he's telling you your husband died, and that he can get you away to become a nun. So upon hearing this and seeing that Romeo is dead, Juliet only has a couple of options. She can return home and either be disowned by her family or married off to another man, since Romeo ends up in Paris. So she won't be married off to Paris, but she'll eventually get married off to another man. And it really could go either way, but she doesn't know how her parents would respond considering the circumstances, which is fair. Or she can go with Friar Lawrence and live in a convent, leaving her whole life behind entirely. But she would again lose some agency because nuns have to live in very strict rules in a convent, right? So instead, in this moment, Juliet chooses herself and stabs herself in the chest. At this moment, Juliet realizes she is truly alone and she will never truly have agency in her life again. So what does she do? She chooses to end it all. So as I hope you can kind of see throughout this whole video, is that Juliet is truly the figure moving the plot along, whether it's through her deliberate choice by proposing marriage or through her conviction, as with the nurse and Friar Lawrence, who both hear her pleas and decide to help her. Juliet is the reason most of the events in the play happen. Without her, we would never get to the tragic end. Juliet was never an ingenue. She was just a young woman. But unlike an ingenue, she was not innocent or unsophisticated. She was worldly. Her fiery wit, quick tongue, and overall intelligence are what define her as a character. And if you didn't get that, you weren't truly reading the play. Some fun Easter eggs is that this is the lipstick I wore when I played Juliet. This is a necklace I wore as I played Juliet. And I have a tattoo, actually, of a dagger. So that's what this is. I got that after I played my last performance as Juliet a year or so ago. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a little bit different, I guess, than some of the other stuff that I've done. If you want to see more Shakespeare stuff, let me know. I could talk about many of the plays on end for no reason. But if you don't want to see that, that's totally okay. If you don't like this kind of video, that's okay too. And I don't blame you. I just appreciate you for still being here. If you are, let me know in the comments below what other stuff you would like to see. I have more Baldur's Gate 3 videos on the way. I'm working on them, okay? They take time. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment, and hopefully I will see you in the next video. You know what they say, parting is such sweet sorrow that I shall say goodnight till it be morrow. Okay, that's it.